Every Republic Day, 1.4 billion Indians watch the parade, the tanks rolling down Kartavya Path, the soldiers marching in perfect formation, the fighter jets screaming across the sky, the colorful tableau from every state. But this Republic Day, I want to talk about something else, something that boardrooms in Silicon Valley, factory floors in Taiwan, and investment banks in London are all watching closely: India's economic transformation. And I don't mean this in the usual way we've heard for decades. India will be a superpower someday. Someday. Always someday. I mean actual measurable change happening right now. In March 2025, Apple exported $2 billion worth of iPhones from India to America. In a single month, India now processes half of all real-time digital payments on the entire planet. Indian rockets have launched satellites for 34 countries. Indian startups are collectively worth $366 billion. But here's what makes this different from celebration videos. We're also going to talk about what's broken, the jobs crisis, the skill gap, the states being left behind, because a real conversation needs the full picture. So let's go through it. Sector by sector, number by number. Let's see the GDP story. Let's start with the big picture. In 2014, India's GDP was $1.8 trillion. Today, in 2025, it's nearly $4 trillion. That's more than double in just over a decade. But the ranking story is even more interesting. In 1990, India was the 12th largest economy, behind Spain, Brazil, South Korea. In 2000, we actually dropped to 13th. We went backwards. Then we started climbing. 9th by 2010, 5th by 2020. And in June 2025, something historic happened. India officially passed Japan to become the 4th largest economy in the world. Japan, the country that was the symbol of Asian economic success, the country whose GDP was 10 times larger than India's in 1990. We just passed them. Morgan Stanley projects will overtake Germany by 2028 to become the 3rd largest. By 2035, GDP could reach anywhere from $7 trillion to $10 trillion depending on how well we execute. Here's something that rarely gets discussed. By 2035, 3 to 5 Indian states could individually become trillion-dollar economies. Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Karnataka. If these were independent countries, they'd rank among the world's top 20 economies. Maharashtra alone could be bigger than Thailand or Argentina. Now, the important context. Yes, we're the 4th largest economy, but per capita income is still only around $2,500. America is at $80,000. China is at $13,000. We're a large economy because we have lots of people, but the average Indian is not wealthy by global standards. That matters. Growth has to translate into prosperity for ordinary people, not just impressive GDP headlines. Now let me tell you about something where India isn't catching up to the world. We're actually leading the world. Digital Revolution UPI, Unified Payments Interface. In 2016, when UPI launched, total transactions that year were 2.65 million. In 2024, 172 billion transactions. That's not 10 times growth, not 100 times. That's over 60,000 times growth in 8 years. Here's the fact that should make every Indian proud. According to the ACI Worldwide Report, India now accounts for 49% of all real-time digital payments happening on the entire planet. Half of all instant payments in the world happen in India. Meanwhile, in America, the world's largest economy, birthplace of Silicon Valley, if you want to transfer money between bank accounts, it takes 2 to 3 business days. In India, 2 seconds. A study from Cornell University, an American Ivy League institution, concluded that India's banking system is more efficient than America's for payments. The tea seller outside my building accepts UPI. The auto driver accepts UPI. The vegetable vendor in a village in Bihar accepts UPI. The panipuri seller has a speaker that announces every payment. Try paying a street vendor in New York or Paris or London with your phone. You can't. And now UPI is going global. It's accepted in Singapore, UAE, France, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Mauritius. Countries are literally sending delegations to India, asking us to teach them how we built this. But UPI is just one part of the digital story. Aadhaar is the world's largest biometric identity system. 1.4 billion people with unique digital IDs. This doesn't exist anywhere else at this scale. Over 500 million Jan Dan bank accounts opened for people who never had bank accounts before. That's more than the entire population of the US and EU combined. Direct benefit transfers through this system have saved the government over 2.7 lakh crore rupees by cutting out middlemen and corruption. When the World Bank talks about digital public infrastructure, they point to India as the gold standard. That's not propaganda. That's their actual assessment. Now let's talk about what's been dominating global headlines. Manufacturing. In 2020, COVID hit. China went into lockdowns. Apple's main factory in Zhengzhou shut down. Suddenly, the world realized 90% of iPhones were made in one country. One factory cluster, one potential point of failure. That was a wake-up call. Companies started asking what happens if China has another lockdown? Or worse, what happens if geopolitical tensions escalate? Enter China Plus One. The strategy of keeping China operations but adding capacity elsewhere as insurance. India became that plus one. In 2021, about 1% of iPhones were made in India. Basically nothing. In 2022, 5%. 2023, about 14%. 2024, around 20%. 2025, we're at 25% and climbing fast. Apple's stated goal for 2026 is that the majority of iPhones sold in America should come from India. Not China, India. The numbers show how fast this is moving. iPhone exports from India were $17 billion in 2024. In 2025, $23 billion. That's 85% growth in a single year. In March 2025 alone, Apple exported $2 billion worth in 1 month. Foxconn just opened a massive facility near Bengaluru. They hired 30,000 workers in 8 months. This plant makes the iPhone 17 Pro Max, Apple's most premium device, and it's becoming Foxconn's second largest facility globally, second only to China. Here's a detail that matters. 80% of these workers are women between 19 and 24. For most, it's their first formal job. That's not just manufacturing statistics. That's families being lifted up. Beyond Apple, Samsung has one of the world's largest phone factories in Noida. Google makes Pixels here. India's phone production went from nearly zero a decade ago to 300 million units annually. The broader electronics manufacturing sector has grown from $30 billion in 2014 to over $100 billion now. Let's talk about semiconductors. For decades, India designed chips but never made them. 20% of the world's chip design engineers are Indian. Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, Nvidia all have major design centers here. But we never manufactured. That's changing. The India Semiconductor Mission has approved 10 projects worth $18 billion. The biggest is Tata partnering with Taiwan's Powerchip for a $10.9 billion fab in Gujarat, India's first major chip plant. Production starts 2026. Micron is investing $2.75 billion. AMD committed $400 million for a design center. Lam Research over $1 billion, plus training 60,000 engineers. We're focusing on legacy chips, 28 nanometer and above. These aren't cutting edge, but they make up 95% of chips in cars, appliances, and industrial equipment. The COVID chip shortage was mostly about these chips. Smart strategy. Build capability first. Walk before you run. The semiconductor market in India was about $38 billion in 2023. It's expected to reach $100 billion by 2030. This is the foundation for everything from electric vehicles to AI hardware. If there's one sector where India has genuinely shocked the world, it's space. In 2014, Mangalyaan reached Mars on our first attempt. America, Russia, Europe all failed their first Mars missions. We succeeded. And we did it for $74 million, less than the budget of the movie Gravity. In 2023, Chandrayaan-3 landed on the Moon's south pole. India became only the fourth country to land on the Moon, and the first to reach the South Pole where water ice exists. In 2024, Aditya L1, India's solar observatory, reached its destination 1.5 million kilometers from Earth. ISRO has launched satellites for 34 countries. The PSLV rocket has over 50 consecutive successful missions, making it one of the world's most reliable launch vehicles. But the exciting part is private space. India opened the sector to private companies in 2020. Since then, over 200 space startups have emerged. Skyroot became the first Indian private company to launch a rocket into space. Agnikul is developing 3D printed rocket engines. Pixel is building a constellation of Earth observation satellites. The space economy is projected to grow from $8 billion to $44 billion by 2033. India is now one of only a handful of countries with complete end-to-end space capabilities, and we do it at a fraction of global costs. Let's deep dive into infrastructure roads. In 2014, India built 12 kilometers of national highways per day. Now it's 28 to 30 kilometers daily. More than doubled. The highway network has expanded from 91,000 to over 146,000 kilometers. The Delhi-Mumbai Expressway will cut travel time from 24 hours to 12. The Bharatmala project is building 34,800 kilometers of highways worth 5.35 lakh crore rupees. Railways. The Vande Bharat, India's first semi-high-speed train designed and built entirely in India. In 2019, there was one. Now over 100 run across the country at up to 180 kilometers per hour. Railway electrification jumped from 40% to 97%. The Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train is under construction. Metro rail has expanded from 5 cities to over 20. Aviation is perhaps the most dramatic. Airports have doubled from 74 to over 150. Domestic air passengers grew from 60 million to 150 million annually. India is now the third largest domestic aviation market in the world. Air India has ordered 470 aircraft. That's the largest order in aviation history. Indigo is among the world's most valuable airlines. Ports have also modernized. Capacity increased from 1,500 million tons to over 2,500 million tons. Ship turnaround time dropped from 4 days to under 2 days. This is critical because every day a ship waits costs money. The PM Gati Shakti program has integrated 16 ministries to plan infrastructure together, ending the chaos of different agencies digging up the same road repeatedly. The India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor announced at the G20 could be transformational if it materializes. Here's a fact that rarely makes international headlines. India achieved 50% of electricity generation from renewable sources in 2024. The target was 2030. We hit it 6 years early. Solar capacity grew from 3 gigawatts in 2014 to over 90 gigawatts now. That's 30 times growth. Solar power now costs 2.5 rupees per unit in some projects, cheaper than coal. The Gujarat Renewable Park in Kutch will be the world's largest at 30 gigawatts capacity. EV sales jumped from nearly nothing to 1.5 million units in 2024. Over 12,000 public charging stations exist now, with plans for many more. The National Green Hydrogen Mission targets 5 million tons annually by 2030. Reliance, Adani, and NTPC are all making massive investments in green hydrogen. Why does this matter beyond the environment? India imports over 80% of its oil. That's a massive foreign exchange drain and a strategic vulnerability. Every step toward renewables reduces that dependence and keeps money in the country. On conventional energy, Reliance's Jamnagar refinery is the world's largest. India has become a net exporter of refined petroleum products. We import crude, add value, export finished products. Now we will understand on trade, FDI, and startups merchandise exports grew from $310 billion to over $450 billion. Services exports are approaching $340 billion. Over 1,700 multinationals have global capability centers in India, employing 2 million people. These aren't call centers anymore. They're doing AI research, drug discovery, financial analysis, and product development. Total exports have crossed $800 billion. Foreign exchange reserves stand at $640 billion. FDI has roughly doubled from $36 billion to over $70 billion annually. Cumulative FDI since 2000 has crossed $1 trillion. On startups, in 2014, India had a handful anyone had heard of. Today, 118 unicorns worth $366 billion combined. Third largest startup ecosystem globally. In 2024, India added the second highest number of new unicorns worldwide. Only America added more. Funding totaled $12 billion. Deep tech funding jumped 78%. Women-led startups got 93% more funding. Bengaluru alone has 51 unicorns. If Bengaluru were a separate country, it would have more unicorns than most nations on Earth. Krutrim became India's first AI unicorn, reaching $1 billion valuation in under a year. That's the third fastest in Indian startup history. They're building AI models specifically designed for Indian languages. The maturity sign: 31% of startups are now profitable at operating level, up from 18% in 2021. The ecosystem has moved from growth at all costs to building sustainable businesses. That's what separates a hype cycle from real transformation. All this growth must benefit people. So let's look at consumption. India's middle class is now 400 million people. By 2030, it'll be the world's largest, with the third largest car market globally. We passed Japan in 2022. Annual sales are around 4.5 million vehicles. Domestic air passengers more than doubled. E-commerce crossed $80 billion. Quick commerce, the 10-minute delivery model, has exploded in ways that don't exist elsewhere. Smartphone penetration crossed 700 million. Data costs are among the lowest globally thanks to the geo-revolution. Indians now consume more mobile data per capita than almost any other country. In healthcare, Ayushman Bharat covers 50 crore people with up to 5 lakh rupees for hospitalization. Medical colleges increased from 387 to over 700. MBBS seats more than doubled. India is already the pharmacy of the world, producing 60% of global vaccines and 20% of generic medicines. In education, IITs expanded from 7 to 23. New IIMs established across the country. Online platforms like PhysicsWallah made quality education accessible to small-town students who could never afford expensive coaching. Defense exports jumped from 1,000 crore to 21,000 crore rupees. That's more than 20 times growth in 7 years. We now export to 85 countries. INS Vikrant, India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, was commissioned in 2022. Only a handful of countries can build aircraft carriers. Now the uncomfortable part, we have to be honest, India still has lot of challenges employment. 1 million people enter the job market every month. Morgan Stanley calculated we need 7.4% GDP growth just to keep unemployment stable. To actually reduce underemployment, 12.2%. That's basically unprecedented for any large economy. Here's what gets hidden in celebration. Manufacturing's share of GDP has declined from 17% in 2010 to 13% now. The Make in India target was 25% by 2025. We're moving backwards. Most job growth has been in construction and informal services. Low pay, no benefits, no security. Skills gap. Only 10% of India's workforce is formally skilled. In developed countries and China, it's 60%. That means 90% aren't equipped for high-value jobs. Regional inequality. Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat race ahead. Bihar, UP, Jharkhand lag far behind. Per capita income in Goa is over 5 lakh rupees. In Bihar, under 60,000. That's 8 times the difference within the same country. 300 million people still live in extreme poverty, nearly half in just 5 states. The Vietnam factor. Vietnam, with 1/14 our population, has attracted more manufacturing relative to its size. Why? Simpler land acquisition, flexible labor laws, better ports, less bureaucracy. The Washington Post headline from March 2025, India declared ready to become the world's factory. But the moment hasn't arrived. Land acquisition remains incredibly difficult. Getting clear titles can take years. Labor laws, though consolidated into 4 codes, are still complex to navigate. Infrastructure gaps remain. Many state roads are poor. Power cuts still happen in smaller cities. Fiscal constraints limit what the government can do. Debt is around 83% of GDP. Tax collection has improved, but is still below comparable countries. These are real problems. They won't disappear with positive headlines, but acknowledging them is the first step to solving them. India is working on these issues: PLI schemes, labor reforms, infrastructure push. The question is whether execution can match ambition. So this Republic Day, as we watch the parade, let's reflect on what January 26th really means. 75 years ago, when the Constitution came into effect, it made bold promises: justice, social, economic, and political, equality of status and opportunity, dignity for every individual. For decades, those remained just words for hundreds of millions of Indians. We had potential. We had people. We didn't have execution. But something has shifted. Is India perfect? Far from it. Jobs crisis, inequality, poverty all persist. But we also have Apple building its second largest manufacturing hub here, a payment system the world wants to copy. Rockets landing on the moon. Startups worth more than many countries' GDP. Renewable energy targets hit 6 years early. Morgan Stanley called this a once-in-a-generation shift. The Economist, skeptical of India for decades, now runs covers about India's rise. This Republic Day, the world is finally seeing what India can become. So let's be proud of what we have achieved so far and the rising growth of India. Share this if you found it valuable. Let me know in the comments what you think India's biggest challenge is. Subscribe for more content like this. Happy Republic Day.